Hey, thank you so much for coming this evening. This is going to be a heavy topic, but I'm hoping that you'll go home encouraged and you'll be going home in a sense with a little bit more knowledge. And obviously there's going to be, even in a room this size, there'll be people either going through a mental health issue, know somebody who is going through a mental health issue, or you will eventually know somebody who will go through it. So it's whether it's now or in the future. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and statistically that'll go through. So I'm just going to go back a little bit to if you would have any questions whatsoever, or pretend to get your phones out. This is the best way of doing it. Or pretend to get your phones out. And then you can put in that code, and you can actually put in questions anonymously about mental health. Maybe someone that you know, something that you have experienced, or maybe want a comment about. You put in that code, and then I'll try and address most of those things at about 11 o'clock tonight. All right. It is a very wintry night, so I really appreciate you coming out this evening, and hopefully you'll find this really, really worthwhile. As I said, these are the topics I'm going to be hopefully covering in the next hour or so, and hopefully allow enough time to go through some Q&A. And a lot of these topics are quite heavy, especially when we start talking about the word suicide, and everyone is going to have a different reaction when you hear those words. And feel free, if you feel like one of the slides that I'm going to show you is of benefit to you, feel free to take a photo. I give you my full permission to do that. But one of the things that I really want to land on, and it's probably one of the most important things, is self-care. Caring for yourself, because you're no good to anyone else unless you care for yourself. And that's what I'm hoping to be doing. We at Focus on the Family have a bit of a mantra about, I'm not assuming everyone knows who I am, because I've already been here a few times, and I'm just assuming you know who I am. So if you have, has anyone not been here the first time? Okay, well, hello there. Sorry, I just went into automatic mode. Right, my name is Brett Ryan. I work for an organisation called Focus on the Family, and many people know me through the radio, because I do a lot of radio work. And people recognise my voice before they recognise my face, and they go, "Is that you? Is that really what you look like?" Oh, gee. But Focus on the Family is all about helping families thrive, and we do that in a variety of ways. Radio is one. We do social media and the websites and public speaking like this. One of the things we love the most is running marriage retreats and marriage conferences, parenting seminars. And in fact, just on a side note, you're the first people I'm going to tell you this. We're just partnered up with a group called the Grandparents NGM, National Grandparents Movement. Now you're going to look at me and say, he surely can't be involved with that. I'm not qualified. Well, I've actually got 3.75 grandchildren. All right. And my son, and for those who may recall, I went overseas to go and visit my son and daughter-in-law in Romania, and they're arriving next Thursday to have baby number 3. But I'm in Adelaide when they arrive. It's just unfortunate the way that works out, but I'll come back quickly. And one of the things that I love doing about this partnership is that they're having a grandparent conference. And people from all over Australia coming around, in Wollongong of all places. And interestingly enough, I just met the guy via Zoom last Tuesday week. Fast forward to when I went to Sydney, when I just said I went to Sydney, who was in the studio was this guy in the studio. I thought that was quite a coincidence. So we actually had this sort of like, yeah, it was all like this reunion. And we're actually going to be putting together our little grandparents. And many of you, you're not qualified for here, but you may know someone who is going to be grandparents, and we're going to be putting together a program very soon to help grandparents do the best they can. And so at Focus, we want to inform you. We also want to get you to understand, to be more involved. And you're going to actually have to be more involved with people that may have a mental health issue. You can't just be a bystander. And this is by no means going to be an exhaustive course, but it's going to give you an overview, and it may give you a hunger to actually fill in some of the gaps. And as I said, it's not just someone else's issue. We're seeing it more and more happening. And since COVID, we've seen a higher incidence of anxiety, higher incidence of depression, higher incidence of loneliness and isolation, and all of those lead to having a mental health issue. And so the other thing is now you're going to be more intentional about knowing what to say, what not to say, and they're just as important. And sometimes saying nothing. Saying nothing is one of the greatest gifts you can give, because sometimes we fill in the void. We want to say something, but your presence is sometimes even more powerful. Coming alongside somebody. So you don't have to be the expert, you don't have to cure them, you don't have to fix them, but you can come alongside someone. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to address today. All right, so mental health. If for those who want to have a little bit more of a definition, mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. That is good mental health. That's what we all want. When things aren't quite right, we're not able to contribute. We're not able to live as well as we would like. And so many of the times when we say mental health is actually meant to be good, is a positive thing, but we've actually made it sound a little bit more negative, and we usually associate it through depression, anxiety, and the multiple and myriad of other mental health issues, which I'm not going to go into great detail, but people with borderline personality disorder, PTSD, there's also complex PTSD. I just met someone just recently with that condition. And when someone's going through a mental health issue, it has a ripple effect. Not only are those directly involved, but it has a ripple effect on a society, on the community, and especially when we are having someone who goes through a crisis. And I'll talk about that as we go along. And for those who have got a faith, and I'm not assuming everyone's got a faith, but I do have a faith. And one of the things that we don't fully appreciate is the sense of belonging. We all want to belong. We all want to have a community. And I was just talking just before about the sense of community. Even coming to an event like this, you feel like, I can have a bit of food, I meet people I don't sort of know, or I know some people, and we can have conversations. But even at the same time, in a crowd, people can still be lonely. And we're going to talk about that as a little bit more, because we all want to have a sense of belonging. And for those who have got a faith, it used to be very, very much in the olden days, and I'm hoping that's decreased, but it used to be that if someone had a mental health issue, you didn't believe, or you didn't pray enough, or you didn't read the Bible enough. And all these things actually made people feel even more guilty or more shameful, more isolated, simply because people don't understand someone going through a mental health issue. But we do understand medical conditions. If you've got high blood pressure, you take a tablet. Great. If you've got diabetes, we take, insulin, or we take tablets, and we understand that. We also understand that if you have some sort of disability, like hearing disability, or even glasses is a disability, believe it or not. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying I wear glasses. But at the same time, we have variant disabilities in our world, and mental health issue is just another form of disability, and it can be treated sometimes with medication, counselling, support, and other mechanisms, behavioural changes. And when I talk about that, I'm actually going to be sharing a little bit of my history. For those who don't know, I was a critical care nurse for 15 years, and I majored in intensive care and accident emergency. So I've been in the cold face, dealing with people with a myriad of different illnesses or injuries, but also mental health issues and addictions. And then I became a pastor, and now I've been working at Focus on the Family for the last 10 years. So I've been in the people business, and I love people. I love people. I love talking to people. I had two gentlemen next to me on the way down. And you know how sometimes we don't like to talk? I'm one of those people that likes to talk. I know, are you shocked? I found out this guy had been married for 44 years,
And he says, I don't know how I've made it last this long, because I like to drink and I like to gamble, and my wife loves to go to the theatre and the arts. But we make it work. And the other guy was coming down from the Gold Coast to watch the football tonight, in the joy of going from blue sky and sunshine to the freezing cold of the MCG. But I am generally interested in people. And I'm hoping at the end of this, you're going to be generally interested in people. We've got Are You OK Day coming up very, very shortly. And everyone is more aware of that. But I would like to have this go into a higher level. It's not just Are You OK Day. It's actually checking in on people on a regular basis. And often I would look into people's eyes and just say, how are you really? Because we often wear our masks really well. When someone asks the question, how are you? I'm fine, which stands for freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. But the fact is, we see when things aren't going to plan, aren't going right, and our mental health capacity is diminishing our day-to-day living. That's compromising our ability to work, it's compromising our ability to look after ourselves or look after those around us. We see it as a sign of weakness. And I don't know whether you can actually, if anyone's writing notes, this is something that I think is, I love this statement. And it might seem like a tongue twister. It's okay not to be okay. But it's not okay to stay not okay. So we all have our bad days, but for someone with mental health issue, it's not just one day, it's an ongoing issue, and it is compromising their day-to-day living. That's when we have to be very serious about A, getting help for ourselves, or for you who are going to be more confident and hopefully more competent tending to those around you, that you'll be able to come alongside them in a much more powerful way. All right, so I don't know why that's not going through. Okay, just for those who love data, and I love statistics, it tells a story, and it would say, and you may have heard some of these figures before, but I'm just going to reiterate, for adults it's about 1 in 5, for children under the age of 18, we're seeing about 1 in 4. Now, I'm not going to go through every one of those things, but we're still seeing anxiety, as I said, is an all-time high. We also see depression or grief in its various forms. We do see that as a result of mental health issues, people turn to addictive behaviours, and it seems that men turn to it more often than women. But I just got an email from a woman just this week, and she has turned to alcohol. Now, when women turn to a substance to cure, and I'll use that word in inverted commas, it's not a cure, it's really just to numb the pain that they're going through. It means that there's something significant going through it. And it tends to be more difficult to treat a woman who's got an addictive behaviour than a man. That's just a side note. But we're also seeing that young people are actually thinking about taking their own life as suicide, as an option, a viable option in our culture today. For you and I who are thinking rationally, you're thinking, how does anyone think that this is a good answer? If you could try and use your imagination, that someone felt so low, felt so overwhelmed, that the thought of not being present or physically able to live and breathe and walk and talk and all those things is an option, you can just see how far someone is. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go along. And young people are more concerned about their body image. It's not just a guy issue or a girl issue, it's everyone's issue. And it's no respecter of persons. Age does not discriminate when it comes to this, and we're seeing this happen time and time again.
Now, I mentioned to you before, and again, I don't wish to say that I'm preaching to you, but the Bible actually has a lot of references to mental health issues, believe it or not. And in fact, it's actually very clear that the Bible is still as relevant to us today as it was when it was written so many years ago. And just to give an example, there's in the Psalms, and I won't go into it all together, but I want to go to the last line where it says, "Darkness is my closest friend." Could you imagine? That's someone having a really bad day. That is a significant bad day. But even in the first one, you have put me in my lowest pit, in the darkest depths. Your wrath lies heavily on me. Feeling overwhelmed. These words are very common when someone is dealing with a mental health issue. But the funny thing is, even though how low this person is going, he's actually still talking to God. And I think that's he's actually saying, God, you've abandoned me, but I'm still going to talk to you anyway, which I think is quite paradoxical. That even though everything's going terribly and everything's hitting the fan, he's still talking to God. And I don't know whether you have a faith, but that's something that I would encourage you to consider, and even talking to people here over this time. There was another thing that we actually have to take in consideration. That I think I alluded to this a little bit before about that, because I come from a medical background. I understand medications can really help us. I also understand the benefits of therapy. Many years ago, when I did my psych rotation, I went to a place called Larundel. This doesn't exist now, but Larundel was where the chronic people went. And they were still using, and it still actually is used today, ECT therapy, electroconvulsive therapy. That still is a viable option. It seems barbaric, but it has some legitimate uses. But just looking at their well-being, we can have our physical well-being, but we also have to understand that we're made of body, soul, and spirit. And all those emotions that we have and build up actually have not only an emotive feeling, but it also has a cerebral process, but it also has a physiological effect. That someone who may be going through depression, for example, just is so low, it has no energy, that they just can't even get out of bed. You might have someone who's got other co-current stressors, that it actually is affecting their immune system. So at any time, because they're so low, their immunity system is so low that they catch everything. And that adds to their isolation, because they simply can't go out because of fear of bugs, or also fear of catching something, or simply because, again, they just don't have the energy to do it. So, here we go. Many people do not seek professional help for a myriad of different reasons. It could be financial. It could be because they're embarrassed and they feel like they're failing, and because of the words that people say in ignorance and naive, and that's not going to happen from you guys any longer. You won't say things silly. You're going to be a come alongside people. The other idea is that they're in denial. I was speaking to a man just yesterday, and he's having a long battle with his wife, who's got some mental health issues, who's had some complex diagnoses in the past, but she feels like she's getting better. But in his observation and her behaviours, she's not. So there's a disconnect of the reality. In her mind, I'm well, but those around them are not. They're seeing something differently. So there's a form of denial. We've talked about the people of faith, because of lack of faith. And some people think it's simply, you got to think happy. Be happy. Just be happy. But why just be happy? Can't you just be happy? Can't think happy thoughts. Has anyone ever, even when your mums and dads may have said something like that, just they're sad, just think happy thoughts, and thinking that's going to be the magic cure. But that is not necessarily the case. And as I said, the Pharisees have actually said they're not praying or reading the Bible enough, all those things that can actually happen. And sometimes simply because they don't have the access or the resources. We've seen since COVID, people's waiting times to go and see a psychologist has blown out to 6 to 8 to 9 months. So when someone needs something now, they can't get the help they need. Even if they're putting up their hand, they have to wait. Isn't that frustrating? As soon as they've had the courage to say, I need some help, but they can't get the help that they need. But I have to say it has greatly improved over the last few years about general practitioners putting into mental health care plans. And for you, this is a good reference for you to be aware of. If you know somebody who's going through a mental health crisis, is to encourage them to see their GP for a couple of reasons. One is to get a full checkup, to get a physiological checkup, to find out where their hormones are, what their electrolytes are doing, what their hemoglobin is doing. And I'm going to give you a reference point for someone who's very close to me, my wife. We're a very happily married couple, and then my wife just went off her tree, just all of a sudden. And I'm actually going to go and do some traveling talking about healthy families and healthy relationships. And she's screaming at me, just yelling at me. Fortunately, I'm thinking, what have I done wrong? She was, and she's going, she goes, I want to just leave this whole earth and go somewhere else. That's how bad things work. Fortunately, she went to go and see her general practitioner, and he was just, or she, sorry, was just about to put her on a mental health care plan to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever it may needed at the time. But she said, look, I think we should just get some blood tests just to see where the baseline is. It turns out her vitamin D was very low. Her vitamin B12 was super low, and her iron levels were very, very low. One of those things would cause a disruption to your mental health acuity. But she had the perfect storm. And from within about 2 weeks of having all those started to be treating, high dose vitamin D, had an iron infusion, B12 injections, 2 weeks she was back, not yelling at me anymore. So that was actually a really good win. And it's surprising how many people, they might think that they're going crazy. And that's what my wife did. She thought she was going crazy, but I commend her for actually going to seek some professional help. But sometimes we need to get our full checkup. But as I was saying before, GPs are far more effective at this at the moment. Now, their hands are tied. They can't provide psychologists and counsellors, but they can actually prescribe, because if sometimes finances is a obstruction, the cost is that they can actually prescribe seeing a psychologist under Medicare or a subsidised fee. So that's just something that you should be aware of. And I mentioned before that the Bible has got some encouragement for us. And one of the things it says, when things are going well, it's easy to do that. It's easy to come along, yay! But when things aren't going so bad, we as human beings aren't as good. But I think we need to be better at this. I think we need to be much more effective and much more confident to come along and cry when they're crying, or to just simply be present. You don't have to solve the issues, but it is something that I would encourage you to consider being there. Now, this may trigger something, and I apologise in advance if it does trigger something, because I'm going to just talk about the heaviest of all mental health issues is suicide. And you don't have to give a show of hands, but any room of any size, there's usually one or two people who this has impacted them directly. And I'm not trying to diminish your pain in any shape or form, or make a reference to you didn't pick it up, because sometimes there's nothing you can do. But I am going to be talking about some signs and symptoms to look out for to prevent it. But you can be the perfect person, and guess what? There are no perfect people. But you could do everything perfectly, and yet someone could still take their own life through suicide. Through it. It's just something that they can hide it very, very well. but we're going to be talking about suicide for now. There's someone's calculated this, that if anyone takes their own life through suicide, it directly impacts about 115 people. That's 115 people directly impacted by one person taking their own life through suicide. But do you realise that 115 people, when they've been impacted, the ripple effect of that, someone at work takes their own life through suicide, then everyone at work is affected, then they take that home to their homes and just processing, so that affects their family dynamics. And then those kids will have, if they see their dad or their mum going through processing unhealthily, then they take it on board. So it's just this ripple effect, enormous. And a couple of years ago, it was just pre-COVID actually, my wife and I were up in Toowoomba of all places, and we were hosting a marriage conference. A couple came along to that conference, seemed to have a really good time, gave us some really positive feedback. He said he felt better this is a Sunday, doing really well. On the Monday, he took his own life through suicide, just out of the blue. I happened to be up there, and they were saying, we need to have some consultation. They invited me to go and speak to the church on the weekend, which is a very sobering thought, as you can imagine, when the ripple effect in the church community, and how devastating it was, not only for his wife, but left a small child behind. But how do we make sense of it all? How do we make sense of it? And sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But I'm hoping that you'll have a greater clarity of what this suicide could actually do and impact. And I'm not going to actually ask for a feedback, but every time I've spoken about this, have you been impacted by it? But I've also been, when I do some training, formalised training in this topic, I actually ask people, how many of you have ever considered taking their own life through suicide, which is a very confronting question. And someone said, how dare you ask this? And every time I've ever been in a room, there's always someone who's actually said, that's me. I've actually thought that was a viable option. And so, as I said, it's a very sensitive, very real, potentially very raw topic, and hopefully that you'll feel okay at the end of this. So, again, I thought there was a great picture, I have to say. But have you ever seen a documentary like David Attenborough, when he's saying things like, you see the gazelle and the lions and the pride surrounding. I won't do it all, I just think. But basically, you hear David Attenborough talking about, describing that the lions are actually looking for the weakest link. They're looking for the injured, the old, the young, the ones that have been isolated from the pack, ones that have been on their own. And that is what the enemy, and that's what happens with mental health. You feel further isolation, sometimes by your own choice, and you push people away. And so people say, oh, well, I'll give up on you. So then you feel further isolation, that no one cares. And that's when it can have that spiral effect that nobody knows me, nobody cares. Why do I think it's worthwhile for me to continue living on this earth? There's a lot of things of what can lead to a suicide, and for the sake of time, I can't go into great details. Sometimes it can be very impulsive, sometimes it can be very planned, very methodical. Sometimes it can be completely irrational, sometimes it could be rational, and that seems to be a contrary thing to actually unpack. As I mentioned before, and this may be something that I'll give you just a show of hands, just in this room. Do you think suicide is a selfish act?
Sorry.
Okay. Do you think it's an unselfish act? Does anyone know how to use their hands? All right. Well, I appreciate your honesty, and people are thinking, is this a trick question? And I'd have to say it is a bit of a trick question. Because yes, it is a selfish act, and also it's an unselfish act. And I'll explain that in a few moments. Because we're all going to have various opinions or our point of view when it comes to suicide. And I'll unpack this in more. The fact is, the yes and no answer of that is when someone's going through suicide, they think that they are a burden. They're spoiling everyone's fun. They're a weight upon their spouse, their children, and they actually think their life would be better for it if I'm not here. So that's the unselfish act. The selfish act is those people are left behind, scratching their heads. What could I have done differently? Why didn't I get the right help? What could I have done? And they have to be left with the repercussions of that person. That's when the selfishness comes, the whys, and the dealing with the grief. Having spoken to a number of parents who their children have taken their own life through suicide, they're just devastated, and they will, in some respect, will never recover the loss of their child. So that's when you think it is selfish. But the other side of things, they're actually doing something that's selfless, thinking it's better. All right. Probably the reasons why most people, either they're isolated or they're disconnected, but also I would actually add another word, is they feel hopeless, without hope. And that's probably the biggest thing. If you're going to give somebody as the best thing you can do is to instill in them a sense of hope. And that has actually been the most encouraging and the most curative of most people going through a depressive disorder. There's a variety of reasons why people can become isolated and disconnected. There's the physical side of things, so that may be because of a disability, like they can't get out. It may be because that they're emotionally isolated because people don't understand that they're going through stuff. Maybe it's cultural, that they feel like they're away from their family, away from their culture, and that's something that's simple. I could go into a lot more detail one by one, but the relationally thing, it's surprisingly a number of people who go through a divorce or some sort of relational crises can actually lead to a suicidal thought. And then something that's spiritual, which I mentioned before, is that they feel abandoned by others, but they also feel abandoned by God. A lot of reasons why they can feel isolated and disconnected. So what are you looking out for? There's a couple of risk factors, and these are known by, and I'd encourage you. And if for those who would like to go a little bit more deeper on these, and I've unpacked these, I've actually got a 4-part series, a course on mental health and well-being, which looks at a lot of these slides already, but goes into a bit more detail, and that's for free. And everyone likes things for free. It's a great business model. Risk factors, people with a mental health diagnosis, a traumatic event, a loss, and that could be a loss of a job, and we've seen financial stress and mortgage stress increasing significantly. Those who are feeling like they're being bullied in some form, and that happens with children particularly. If they have someone in their family who's had a previous attempt, or they've had a previous attempt, could lead to a suicidal thought. Marginalised people are feeling isolated because no one understands, and then they may have had alcohol or substance abuse. Then some other, going to the next level of warning signs, what to look out for. If they said, might as well just go and top myself off, that's a warning sign. It's a silly comment, but it's a warning sign. Not always the case, but if they become a little bit more abusive of their own bodies, they've got a cavalier attitude, that they're drinking more or they're taking more drugs, that's another warning sign. The ups and downs, being more moody, more aggressive, more angry, or they might just remove themselves and they become further and isolated. So for example, that they might have been involved in a sport club. They love their sport, they love their netball, they love their soccer, they love their football, whatever it is, and then they suddenly don't turn up any longer. They don't come to practice, they don't have that camaraderie, they just remove themselves. That's a bit of a warning sign. And then you go into more detail about they might give away, all of a sudden they give it away, they say, can you look after my dog? Their prized possession. Can you look after my dog? And you're thinking, what? You love your dog. Oh, I just think, can you look after my dog for a couple of weeks? That's when your little antenna may need to be up. It's not always the case. So if anyone asks you to look after their dog, don't always think, because they might be going on holidays, all right? So just a little few things like that. Okay. The tipping point, and we actually see that when someone's going through it. Again, I'm rushing through these things, but hopefully it'll be me. We saw when Robin Williams, the great comedian, took his own life through suicide, we actually saw a significant increase of other people doing the same thing. So someone famous. We also see cluster suicides or cluster suicidal attempts, particularly in schools. But I will just put a bit of an asterisk here, a bit of a caveat here. Self-harming, cutting, or doing injurious things to themselves is not necessarily suicidal. It could be, but it's not always the case. Sometimes self-harming is because they're in pain and it's a cry for help. And they're actually got some internal pain and they actually are in control. So it seems like contrary that they would think that causing themselves harm actually numbs their pain. It doesn't have to make sense, but that's what they're doing. And you have to, I went to a drive-through at McDonald's and the lady who served me, and she was really up, and I just smiled at her and talked to her just like I want to normally talk to anyone. But on her arms, she had about 30 scars across her arms. I was thinking how sad that she thought that was a good thing for her to do. She'll always have those scars in some description. But I was really encouraged her, and I said, look, you've had it tough, but you're doing really well. And she said, just that little bit of words of encouragement. When there's a traumatic event, and then we've seen this with fires or flooding, or the financial stress, that's the biggest one that has caused them man. When someone actually says things like, look, and it seems very rare that you'll get this, but sometimes maybe someone says, I don't want to be on this earth any longer. So they've got this intent to die. And you're going to have some different things you can do, some questions to ask, and I'll go through this in a moment. All right, so here, these are the 3 words you're going to remember. Ask, assess, act. Ask, assess, act. So here's an action plan. The questions that you need to ask. And again, this will be helpful for you. And I've done this myself when I had someone in a situation who rang the church when I used to be a pastor at a church. And I, it's a little bit different being a theorist as opposed to a practitioner. Everyone has it's very rare that you have a complete stranger. It's usually someone that you know. But in this case, I had to try to ask the right questions, assess the situation, and do some actions on someone I didn't know at all. So, you might think by asking the question, someone that you know, are you really thinking about taking your own life through suicide? Very, very confrontational. How many think that would actually plant the seed? You might be right. People think that it actually plants the seeds. Yeah. People think that if they ask that question, they're actually going to put it into somebody's world. In fact, it's the complete opposite. It's actually probably the most confronting question they could actually ask, because they can either give 1 of 2 responses. No way! I've never even thought about taking my own life through suicide. Never. Or alternatively, actually I have, which is in the follow-up question. So asking the question may seem confrontational, but you don't say things like, you're not thinking about doing something stupid, are you? It's very nebulous. So what does that mean? It's better to actually use the words suicide or killing yourself. It's much more in their face, and it's something that I think people are fearful of. And I'll put it a little bit of this may seem like a tangent, but it's not. Whenever someone has a relative or a loved one who's died, people are a bit reluctant to know what to say. They think, if I go and say, how are you doing, it's going to make them feel more sad. I dive right in there. So I would say something like, so how's your new reality without your... And they can respond accordingly, but it's actually bringing it into the open, not pretending that it didn't happen. Because if they feel like no one's asking the question, they feel further isolated. And I don't think that's fair to them. Same thing, if you have someone that you know you have got some warning signs, you've got some feelings, maybe your gut feeling, whatever it is, or they've exhibited some signs, and you ask the question, are you thinking about taking your own life through suicide or killing yourself? It's that aha moment, the gotcha. They have to either respond one of two ways. No, I have not. Good. I am concerned for you though, because of X, Y, and Z. Or they'll say, actually I have. Then we go into the next part. And I'm going to have this on every slide. If urgent, call 000. When in doubt, call 000. It'd be better, and because people sometimes say, if you tell anyone, you're no longer going to be my friend. If you tell anyone, you're history to me. My response would be that I'd rather you not be my friend. I'd rather be history to you than you taking your own life through suicide.
What about lifeline? That's another option.
Yeah, I'll give you a whole bunch of different things. Yeah.
Lifeline sucks. But like I see their sign near the train station and stuff.
Yeah.
Where you cross the chain. There's a few like train stations that have that. Where it's like got their number and stuff right in the train. So I think that's like a newer thing that's been happening.
And different experiences, and probably now is not the time, but I'd love to be able to unpack that. You know, your response of lifeline sucks. For many other people, it's been literally that lifeline. And we've actually seen the increase of people using a variety of different ones, Beyond Blue, Kids Line, the whole things. It has been that saving grace. But everyone's going to have a different experience through it, but I appreciate your comment there. So, how, when, and where. So if someone says, I'm thinking about taking my own life, suicide, you can go to the next level. How do you think you're going to do that? Well, I'm going to shoot myself. Well, if they don't have access to a gun, it's probably likely they're not going to do it that way. But if they said, I'm going to take some tablets, do you have access to the tablets? So you have to actually try and find out if they've actually been honest, and do they have the means. When do you think you might like to do that? Sometimes it could be on a significant an anniversary on something. It could be they've planned ahead. And where are they going to do it? I've heard some frightening stories that a mother took their own life through suicide, but she didn't think it through, that her children came home from school only to discover her. I mean, that's someone who's irrational thinking. They didn't think through the consequences. And as I said, there's some different things that are going to cause some concern here. Okay, so things you can do. So that ask the question, assess if it's legitimate, and there's the act. You don't have to solve this issue. Get some help. 000 is one. Maybe a pastor or a chaplain or a coach, or widen the net to say you're not the only one. And I've had a friend of mine who was one of my staff members who was helping someone who was having suicidal thoughts. And I could see them becoming overwhelmed. And I said, you need to widen the circle. It is not your burden to carry. And I'll be encouraging you. You don't have to be the savior. You don't have to be the hero. But you do need to get some other people involved. I did this TV show just recently, and the question was asked, presents was for its Christmas, presents, E-N-T-S, or presence, E-N-C-E. Presence is one of the greatest gifts I alluded to in my opening remarks. Coming alongside a person to say, look, I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to do. But what I can do is I'm going to be here with you. That's your presence, being fully present, to cry with them, to even distract them, or simply to be there in silence. Knowing someone who's actually, going back to the death of somebody, people don't, in a state of shock, don't remember what people say, but they do remember who was there. You could be that person that can come alongside them. So just being there. And I said about giving them hope, not cliche lines, you've got so much to live for. But even just to say, I care for you, you matter. I see you, you're important. Those words can actually give them a glimpse of some hope where they felt hopeless, lonely, isolated for a myriad of different things. And I'm going to be talking about the looking after yourself a bit later on, okay? So just bear with me. All right. Don't keep a secret, as I said before. Lose a friendship. Better to lose a friendship than losing a friend. You can't fix them, and don't keep on saying, I know something. That's not good. We do that, unfortunately, too often. We like to be in the know. For young people, this is something for younger people to, if you've got someone in your world that is a teenager. But I have to also say that there's even 8-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds have actually been successful in taking their own life through suicide. So through the wonders of technology, they can Google something and get the step-by-step of how to do it. Family is really important, or even simply an adult. And I'm going to say this, for those who are in church world, for someone to stay in church, they've done a research on this, if they have 5 significant adults who know them by name and care for them, they're more likely to stay in church. Just as a side note. For those in life, to have people who cheer them on and encourage them, know them by name, can make all the difference. A safe adult. Because sometimes the reason why a young person may be considering suicide is because the adults in their world are not safe. They're the ones that are causing the pain. They're the ones that are causing the harm. And we'll go into the 24-hour hotlines, which have already been alluded to in just a few moments. So, all right. I just put these down. This is just some different comments that suicide is never a solution. It's just not. It does cause more pain for people left behind. And I think suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. These things too shall pass. And what I said to you before about trying to instill in hope, that's probably the greatest cure that you can give to somebody. Instilling them a sense of hope. That life may be bad now, but it won't always be. It may seem overwhelming now, but we'll get you through this. It will take time. They don't suddenly have this happy tablet and everything goes really well. It's very, very, very rarely. But I will say this, and again, there's a lot more to it. But if someone that you know who's going through suicidal thoughts and they suddenly become really well, it could be one of 2 reasons. One, the medication or the counselling is working and they are actually got a sense of an urgency of enjoying life. Alternatively, the second thing is if you have someone who's going through in your world who suddenly gets well, that could also be a warning sign that they have made a decision. They know when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, and where they're going to do it. They've made a decision. So it's not necessarily you're out of the woods when someone's happy. We're hoping that it is, but you should also be very cautious. If someone suddenly says, oh, I'm better now, that's another concern, that you have to still be vigilant. Still be vigilant. But I did say before, if you could miss all these signs, and I've spoken to people who've had someone, their loved one, who took their own life, and it wasn't until afterwards then they go, oh yeah, I did notice that, but it didn't make sense, the jigsaw puzzle. But then there's other people who had no idea whatsoever. They're completely oblivious that person kept it hidden, and there was no way of knowing. That's something that people feel guilt of, and it's nothing you'd be guilty of. And even if you did everything right and everything perfect, a person's still going to make that decision. It's not your burden to carry. Easier said than done, because you can imagine if someone confides in you, they're going to take their own life through suicide. You got them the right help, you did everything right, and yet they still do it, and you still feel like I let them down. That's not necessarily the case. They're still making those decisions themselves. All right. Now, again, for hope, the thief, like the roaring lion, looking for someone to prowl. It's come to steal and destroy and to kill. That's what the enemy is like, mentally against us. But Jesus came to give us life, and life to its full. That's full of hope. That's something that he's got, want that. And again, it's not just suddenly, I'm going to get a happy Jesus feeling. It can happen, most definitely. Absolutely. But it also needs community to help reinforce that feeling of hopelessness, to be full of hope. Now, I've done suicide very, very quickly, and hopefully I've done it at least some information. But now I'm just going to change the pace a little bit to go to grief. And this is probably the most common form of mental health issue that many people are suffering from. And grief is not necessarily a bad thing. We all go through it. We need it. It actually helps us. Could you imagine if we're always up, never sad? Does anyone know anyone like that? They're always up. I would consider myself mainly up. I'm mainly up, but I have my bad days. But for someone who is having a continual number of days in a row, depression, for example, is a diagnosis of feeling sad for 2 weeks or more. So it's a continuum. You can have your good days and your bad days, they're not in depression. But someone who has constantly 2 weeks worth of sadness is someone who is depressed. But grief is a little bit different. And grief is a sadness that we all can go through, but it can lead to being debilitated. And it can actually happen for a variety of reasons. Loss of a loved one, loss of a relationship, financial, I've already said this before. And I'd have to say, infertility is one of the things that many women go through, and they can feel a sense of loss and grief, or a spontaneous miscarriage, or a intentional miscarriage, or an abortion. We see it, it's called, you might have heard the expression PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Then there's post-abortion syndrome, PAS, has almost exactly the same symptoms as someone going through PTSD. So there's a variety of different things. And sometimes just the ability, just going through grief is not being able to do the right thing. My Uber driver that I had from the Gold Coast today, 83 years of age. And he was very fit and healthy and well. He says he drives an Uber drive. He just loves doing it. He just loves it. He goes, I don't have to work, I don't have to do it, but I like doing it. And he does exercises every morning for 40 minutes a day with his wife without failure. He says, it's like my oxygen. And I said, you are living, breathing that. And I thought, that's great. But then other people who can't do what they used to do because of old age, they can't get out, they can't mobilise, they sit in the chair all the time. And my mother could be counted as that. She's not depressed in any shape or form, but she's getting a little bit older. She's 87 now, and then she's not getting out as much. And so when she's sitting in her chair, her knee goes out, and that can lead to a sense of loss and grief. And so that when we have, depending on what the loss is, and it depends on that significant loss. I remember when my dog died when I was 10 or 11 years of age. I was sobbing, and my sister says, it's just a dog, diminished my grief. You should never diminish someone's grief. It's real for them. For a child, for example, when they lose their favourite toy, you as an adult put it through a filter, it's all right, it's just a toy. But for the child, it's significant. When there's a loss and grief, when there's a loss of a loved one, the circumstances can impact that. Was it traumatic? Was it a long, prolonged illness? Was it old age? All these things. Was it a chance to say goodbye? I just spoke to somebody just recently who's their loved one had died when she was 12 years of age. It was their mother. It was their mother who died at the age of 12. And I said to her, and I just go straight there. Tell me a little bit about how she died. What were the circumstances? Was it a long illness or something? And it ended up being an aneurysm. So no chance to say goodbye. It just all happened very suddenly. So that's another part of the grief process. No closure, because there's no chance to say the things that you'd like to say. There is an advantage of someone having a diagnosis of cancer. I know it sounds awful. There is an advantage that you have a chance to say the things you need to say. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of bonus. This is for free. Make sure when you leave people, wherever they may be, leave on good terms. Because you just don't know what could happen. Whether they get hit by the bus or got diagnosed with a debilitating injury, and I've got someone in our family who's just been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and she's only just in her 60s. And she could deteriorate within a 2-year period from completely being functional to not being able to care for herself. So she doesn't know when that could happen, that trigger, that she won't even recognize people in a room. So I actually encourage people to leave. Whenever you're with someone, tell them that you love them, how much you appreciate them, how much they mean to you. It may seem silly, but I guarantee it will benefit for you. You'll benefit that. Okay. A myriad of different ways people can express themselves. It affects everything, very holistically, our thought process, our emotions, our behaviours, and it changes our belief systems. It can affect us physically. It can give us, that lower immunity I mentioned before. And sometimes the grief can actually change our identity, that we're not our normal self when we're going through a grief period of time. And I have to say, and again, a little bit about the causes of grief. It affects people differently. Age is no thing. But all these things can cause significant grief. And that alone, that list is significant in itself. But it can be a lot of things. Aging is a form of grief. Not being able to do what you want to do. But divorce, we're seeing that happening. And it's increasing, happening all the time. And a lot of people throw that figure about 1 in 2 marriages end in divorce. It's not necessarily true. Not necessarily true. I actually think it's worse than that. Not because of marriage, 1 in 2 marriages end in divorce, but we're actually seeing an increasing number of couples choosing to live together before they get married. That won't lead to marriage. They'll split up. So we don't actually know the data. It's because people don't know they could do healthy marriages and healthy relationships so much more. And that's where I'm very passionate about that. There's so much you can do to improve the health and well-being of your relationship. I don't want you to just survive your marriage. I want you to thrive in your marriage and be more proactive rather than reactive. I just sort of put that through on the filter. But everyone's got a different scale. And I'd have to say, it has all these things. I mentioned this before. It's very holistic in its approach. Grief will exhibit holistically in the way that you come across. It could be because you're not sleeping, you can get insomnia. It could be because you get palpitations, you can get panic attacks, you can get headaches, you can get physiological pain in a variety of different things. Then you might actually have that you're just not able to think clearly, cognitively. You can't make a decision. So you don't make any decisions. So a little thing that you could do if you know someone's going through grief is don't give them too many options, like a simple question. What do you want me to do? They don't even know what to do. So you might actually have to narrow it down. Would you like me to go and pick up the kids, or would you like me to stay here with you? Two options. Pick up the kids, practical, or be present here. That empowers them. It gives them a sense of autonomy. But I digress a little bit. I'm just trying to give you as much as I can in a short period of time that we have. So I just put all these different feelings, I think, all those different expressions. And if anyone's feeling bold enough, has anyone ever experienced any of those feelings of grief? Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. All those things, and it can hit you in all sorts of different ways. My father passed away through cancer about 14 years ago, and every now and then, and I feel like I've moved on, but every now and then it will catch me. There will be something that I'll feel this overwhelming sadness, and I'll start weeping. I'll start tearing up because he never got to see me doing what I do now. Like he's never going to see his grandchildren and my children grow up, and I'm feeling like he would be so proud of them. I'd like to think that he'd be proud of what I'm doing now. Those things, and I can just get overwhelmed. The reason why I'm sharing all this is because grief is very, very linear. Very rarely. You don't just suddenly get better. People say, oh, you've got to move on. No, you move forward with the grief. Sometimes good days, sometimes bad days, and it can hit you from out of left field, or it could be a sight, it could be a smell, it could be an experience, it could be music, all sorts of things that can actually have a connection with that person, a favourite song or a favourite movie or visiting a place. All these things can actually cause some sort of some different experiences. So grief is universal, happens to us all. It's always unique to the individual. Everyone's going to be different. And death has been probably the most common things, and depending on the circumstances, I said to you before, how they died, when they died, how old they were, all these type of things will actually have. And I think we should never underestimate. And if you're involved in a church community or another form of community, we need each other. No one does well in isolation. And we can all do with encouragement, because no one ever goes backwards with encouragement. You can have that one for free.
One of my relatives passed away when he was only 21. This is a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And it took me about a year to get over it.
Yeah, and it's all them.
So in this recent, 2 weeks before he died, suddenly we got a call about it, and it was just, I was so shocked.
Yeah. And now you say that, I'm just going to say, my dad's birthday was, what's the date today?
8th of September.
8th. Yeah. Okay. I didn't remember. I didn't ring my mum on my dad's birthday. Bad on me. I was just coming to a conference. That's my excuse. But she did say she wants to go and visit Dad's grave this week, so I've got to try and do that. Thank you. Grief is something that is, again, it's not linear, but eventually you have to move forward. You have to start moving forward with the pain, and you have to go through, and I'm not going to go into for the sake of time, because I want to open up some Q&A that may be of benefit to you. But I do think this last one, find ways to remember and honour the person, is something that I think it helps you with when I say closure, it helps you move forward. And I remember hearing a couple of great stories about this. One of the best stories I've ever heard was there's this woman in her 80s or 90s, and she was always the clown. Everyone heard her laugh. And so when her family wanted to honour her, they gold-plated her dentures on a plaque. And every year they award someone in the family to keep the plaque in honour someone who did something really silly that made everyone laugh. And I thought, how cool is that? It seems, weird, but at the same time I thought that honoured this woman in a very unique way, And they keep on remembering her in a fond way. I think it's quite a nice thing to do.
Yeah, I remember when Puff, the first cat we had, she passed away, and petting other cats was exactly like then. I noticed the purr, the same personality, like Connie, my current cat.
And pets are just as real for, we call them fur babies for a reason. Not that.
I lost Mandy, she's 19, and that was
A lot of different things. For those who you can't fight it, you can't just will yourself, but you have to go with the flow. Be gentle to yourself. It's no excuse to be, lashing out at other people, but kind to yourself and kind to others. Expect the unexpected, as I said. Sometimes it just catch me like that. Just a different thing will happen. Stay healthy, which I'm going to talk about in just a few moments. But stay connected. That's probably the most important thing. That's how we get through when we're going through a grief properly. And I love this last line in blue. Life will never be the same again, but it can be good again. So when you're going through it, you may think it's not going to be the same, but it can be good. It can be. Again, these are words of hope that may help somebody going through it. It's difficult, but it is definitely doable. For those who've got a faith, people would say that God's got plans for you, plans to prosper you. It's not always about finances, but it's also plans to give you a hope and a future. It's good to remember that type of thing. So now I'm just going to talk about the self-care for a few minutes. And this is something that I would encourage you to be reminded that you're no good to anyone else unless you care for yourself. That's what good mental health is. For yourself. And a couple of extra things that aren't written down here. For people who are dealing with depression, and these are 3 things you could all do. It's probably 4 really. Good diet, water, and sleep. 3 things. Good diet, water, hydrating, and good sleep. Because when we're sleep compromised or in sleep debts, we find that's more and more difficult. In fact, people who have got chronic or clinical depression find that when they go to a hospital for a short period of time, they're getting better diet, they're not getting access to alcohol or bad, unhealthy food, they're getting a regular regime of sleep. They find after a period of time, they actually improve. But a couple of extra bonuses, and there's a clinical study just recently, and it was on the news just a couple of days ago. Getting outside in nature is a healing property. Is just getting outside. That's the reason why water or fire is too. Has anyone just could stare at water? My wife, when she's had a bad time, she can go and stare at an ocean for about 3 to 4 hours and just feel her soul being replenished. Getting out inside of nature is good for the soul. Just enjoying the fresh air is good for us. But another little bonus is actually volunteering is another bonus. Thinking of others before ourselves, because otherwise we become the me, introspective, but we have an outward perspective and helping others. So volunteerism is another big bonus. And as I said, a sense of community and belonging is something that is also a great benefit. So,
exercise as well, because I think
exercise, well, that's getting outside, yeah.
walking and,
Most definitely. Anything that stimulates the heart helps us. There was something else here. Finding the things that energize you. If I was to spend a little bit of time with you and I say, what energizes you? And actually, I'm just going to ask a question. What energizes you? What do you like doing? Yeah. Listening to music? What do you like? Volleyball. What do you like? Nature. What do you like doing? People. All right. Those examples, great. What happens when we become overwhelmed or stressed? We don't go out into nature as much as we like. We don't get to go and play volleyball because we're too busy. We don't go and, what was the thing you said before? What? Music, listen to music. We don't do the things we like, and we don't go and because we we're so busy, we don't do the socialization. So it's ironic that when we are feeling overwhelmed or feeling stressed or going through grief, we don't take the things that energize us, to fill our tank. I'm here to tell you it's okay to go and catch up with some people. It's good for you and good for your soul. It's okay to go and listen to music and feel like you're doing something that's selfish, but it's not. You're actually going to be a better you when you look after yourself. Go and play your volleyball and get out in nature. All these things are actually good for us. Then you can help others because you give out of an overflow, not scraping the bottom of the barrel. And so I've got a whole bunch of different websites or different lines. You can look these up on the website. Here's a myriad of different things that you can actually contact. For those who have got Christian, we'd highly recommend the Christian Counsellors Association of Australia. They're all over Melbourne. You can contact them. Some of these great websites have some excellent resources. Our website at families.org.au have a number of different resources, and if you can't find it, please contact us. I'll be more than happy to send you in the right direction. I said to you before, I said that if you're going to help someone going through a mental health issues, to give them a sense of hope. And I love the verse where it says in Isaiah, even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. We all do that. We all go through hard times. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. And that's what I want you to have. Your ability to actually help others, but also maybe help yourself to go through different things. And I'm hoping that what I've shared with you today in the very, very short period of time that I have may be of benefit to you. A little bit of knowledge can go a long way. A little bit more confidence to be bold in asking the question. Because unfortunately, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when someone that you know will go through either those thoughts of suicidal thoughts, depression, grief, anxiety. If you've got someone in your world, particularly if you've got a child who's dealing with anxiety, we've got videos, free videos, a 4-part series on helping children with anxiety, which seems to be, I gave that presentation about 6 years ago, and I spoke at a church, and they thought they might get about 50 people from the community turn up. 200 people turned up because they didn't realise how many people. This was 6 years ago. This is pre-COVID. Fast forward, we're seeing social anxiety increase significantly in our culture. If you want to get some more details or to sign up for a newsletter, that you can either go in weekly in your inbox or monthly, you can choose to do that. We've just launched a family toolkit if you'd like to get a different variety of things, and it includes helping someone going through grief and mental health. So that's these are downloadable. There's a variety of different things. So please take that with you or hand that out to a friend. Feel free to take anything that's here for free. But there's some things that I have to charge for, and we're actually doing a marriage retreat coming up and a seminar. So an online conference call called Real Life, Real Love. That's starting on the 19th. It's the same week just after Marriage Week. There's National Marriage Week coming on the 10th to the 16th for those who are interested. And we're doing a marriage retreat in October and November. So that's available to you. So they do cost some money, but definitely worth the investment for your marriage. And I said I've got different things on the Family Cast, which is free videos. There's just some examples of things you can look at, stuff for youth and young adults. The Dating Project is a really cool thing. So if you want to know how to date properly, that's there. And then we're going to do some Slido questions. So if anyone's got any questions, by all means ask there. All right. Thanks, Kathy. Now, I'm not assuming everyone has questions, but if you do have one, I would like to be able to answer these questions for you. So have a stretch if you like. All right. Now, I don't know, I'm going to read them out. This is the first time I'm going to read them out at the same time as you can look at these questions if you like. So I hope that I'll do that. What role do you think social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, plays into body image problems? A significant amount. No one really understands why, but this idea of having the perfect skin, the perfect body, the perfect six-pack, the perfect everything. Have you ever seen someone take photos of their food? They look like they're doing really well. So that makes them feel worse. They're not going to enjoy things. And then they're not feeling good about themselves. So then they start noticing all their flaws, and therefore the feeds into that body image. And so it is a significant thing. Social media, for all its good things, technology and all its good things, it also has a negative thing. Anything that actually has that connection point that my identity is equivalent or equal to the number of likes or the number of friends or the number of people who are following me. That's a distortion that many a young person, and I saw one study, and I don't know if I get the right, numbers may not be accurate, but about 1 in 14 young people think that they're going to be the next influencer. Like, they want to be the next big thing. They think that's how they're going to make their money. How do I know if that person really has a mental health issue and not seeking attention? How do you know? Well, there are things to look out for that I've already alluded to. Withdrawing themselves, they're not quite their normal self, their behaviour's changed, their body image or their body posture changes. They may not be as communicative, they might be a bit more angry or a bit more frustrated, a bit more short and stuff. All these things, but I have to say, the bottom line is, if you have a gut feeling that somebody's not doing okay, it's probably accurate. So that's when you have to go into the question, how are you really going? They might say, I'm fine. Why do you ask? Well, I'm actually a bit concerned about the way that you're coming across. And so I'm actually asking you, are you really okay? Because if you're not, I'm going to be here for you. Simple question with follow-up questions. Sometimes it's just simply, and it may not be just that they'll come up with the answer straight away. It may be a regular catch-up. So it's not, are you okay? One day of the year. How are you going this week? And then if they say something like, I'm fine, don't worry about me, that's another little, if they say, don't worry about me, that's a warning sign for me. We'll say, well, you may be fine today, but I'm going to check in on you in a couple of days' time. And when you say something that you're going to do, follow it up. I hope it's not, how do I know if a person really has a mental health issue and not seeking attention? Sometimes seeking attention is a sign that they need help. But we also see, when I said about the cluster suicides or cluster self-harming, that's attention seeking sometimes, because they see one person getting all the attention and they're craving attention, so therefore they think, if I self-harm, I'm going to get attention. That's a concern in itself. Why are they doing that? Even craving attention is a concern. May not necessarily be a mental health issue, but is generally a concern. How do I support my colleague whose high school daughter has depression and who is self-harming? That's a great question. That's going to happen more and more. Check in them on a regular basis. They need that support. They need to have someone to download with. They may need to have someone to actually go out on a little bit of a, just to have a time to not have to be fully vigilant all the time. So they might actually say, hey, I'd like to take you out for dinner. Is that okay? They might go, it'd be great just to be normal for a while. Little things like that can make all the difference. So being practical, or simply asking them the question, what can I do for you today that will help you? And we can do this every day. We can do this on anyone you can do. This works in relationships, in marriages, by the way. If you've got a spouse, simply by saying, what can I do for you today that will take some of the load off of you? Say to your kids, what can I do for you today to help you with your studies? What's going to relieve you of some stress? When you've got a work colleague, what can I do for you today that will help you? That may be either practical or simply just emotional support. And I just spoke to somebody yesterday whose wife has basically said, I don't want to talk to you until March the 1st. She's got a date. So he says, it looks like you've made up your mind that you don't want to have married. And she goes, no, I'm just not wanting to talk to you until March the 1st. And he's asking for some advice. I said, sometimes you have to just hear what she has to say, remove yourself, become the best version of yourself. And at the end of it, we were at a cafe. In fact, we went into a cafe and we didn't order anything. How's that? We sat there in the cafe and didn't order anything. Just used the seats. It was great. And at the end of it, the whole cafe had filled up, and I said to him, can I pray for you now? And right there, we're just at the cafe, just prayed for him. He goes, that is just the best thing you could have done for me. That's all I could do. I couldn't do anything practical. I didn't have the solution, but I actually came along and listened to him and prayed for him. Something that we can all do. Do you have some tips on building resilience in young people? I've got a whole bunch of different things on resilience. In fact, I've got a whole video series on resilience, so that's on our website. I won't go through a lot of things, but basically, don't do things for your kids that they can do for themselves. Summary. So if your kid can cook a meal, let them cook a meal. If the kid can make their bed, make their bed. That builds resilience. Don't protect them, don't bubble wrap them, don't put them into the helicopter mode, protect them. Don't lawnmower parenting, that's another one that's come out through. You're just making everything smooth. You're doing your kid a disservice when you do everything for them. And let them fail. It's okay. They do a very good lesson when they fail and have to face the consequences. All right. But if you can't find it, come to our website and I'll send you in the right direction. How do we cope with sudden anxiety and often feel that the world is about to collapse? My heart is pounding and I'm really, really scared. Practically, at least you're asking the right question. That's a good thing. And we have physiological symptoms of anxiety, and panic attacks is quite common, unfortunately. And people have a myriad of different things. But by having a panic attack doesn't mean it's going to be ongoing. Other things to distract you, other things that actually energize you, other things that actually will be helpful. But finding different, everyone's different on that, what you can do. But again, we've got some great articles on anxiety that you can actually go to our website and download. All right, but for the sake of time, because everyone needs to go, but hopefully there are some different things you can do for anxiety you can help. How do I know if my child is just being withdrawn because they are being a teenager, or is the beginning of a mental health issue? Yes and no. Teenagers can go through all sorts of things. And it could be just simply the mood swings, it could be hormonal, it could be peer pressure, popular culture, a whole different things. The best thing you can do for your teenagers is to simply check in on them on a regular basis and ask them the question, how are you doing? What's going on in your world? Are you feeling overwhelmed? How are you going in your studies? How are you going with your friends? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, that's not the Spanish Inquisition. You don't ask all those questions all at once. But check in on them on a regular basis to say, you may not want to talk to me at the moment. That's okay, but I'm here for you. They just need to know that you're on their team. But don't keep on badgering them, because I hate that. But at the same time, if you're concerned, if you are genuinely concerned, there's a gut feeling that it's not just hormonal, it's not just being a teenager, and they're not just being, saying, back off, mum and dad, and you're concerned, then you might need to speak to the school counsellor, get their advice to check in on them. As a parent, sometimes you're too close, and you need other people to be on your team as well. When dealing with a young person who has experienced depression and anxiety previously, how do you know if they are truly improving and feeling better? It's the ebbs and flows. Just because someone has depression and suddenly they get better doesn't mean that the depression is going to go away and never come back. It will happen, probably. Anxiety is the same thing. They could get better and come back. It's the up and down. It's like the grief thing. It's very rarely linear. But when they're starting to feel a little bit more normal, they're getting back into their normal activities, such as getting involved in sport or getting involved in the things that interest them. That's a good sign. getting back into the things that they enjoyed, that's a good sign. And celebrate that. You know, I'm really proud of you. I'm really, really, really pleased that you're getting back into life again and enjoying it. But I'm here to check on you from time to time. I'm going to check on you. I have a friend afraid of heights, but he always threatens to jump down from high building. Is he seeking attention or suicidal? I can't know the actual answer to this question. He's afraid of heights and he's thinking about doing it. I would be encouraging that person to say, look, I'm not too sure what's going on. You're saying that you're going to jump from a height, and I would be asking the question, are you thinking of seriously taking your own life through suicide? I'd be asking the question. That's what I'd be doing. And then go into, we need to get some help. And we're going to get some other people more professional. I'm here for you. I'm not going to fix you, but I'm here for you. That's what I'd be doing. What should you say to someone who tells you that they have no hope for the future? It's really, there's no simple answer here. For those who've got a faith, we can say that, but even that can sound very cliche, that Jesus loves you. You know, God's got a plan and to give you a hope and a future. Again, it can seem very cliche. When someone is very, very low, just simply having one person to care for them could be the spark that they need. So when they're going through and you're telling them that they have got no hope for the future, you say, well, I'm here for you and I believe in you and we're going to see this through. That could be the glimmer that you need to do. They might push and they might be prickly and they don't want to lead you. Check in on them on a regular basis. But it's not your burden to carry. I just remember that. How do you help your spouse if they are not talking, not engaging, not wanting to attend marriage counselling? It seems like a midlife crisis and depression. Can I get that person to contact me and I'll be able to send you some more resources directly? But in summary, for anyone else who's going through this, it could be that they are dealing with depression and that's the reason why they're disengaging. It may be because there's other co-current stressors, financial stressors. It could be they've got some health issues that they haven't disclosed to you. I would say genuinely, most men are the ones who are more reluctant to see marriage counselling, but I'm seeing that in reverse just recently. More and more men want the counselling and the woman doesn't, so it's not just one or the other. It used to be just men. I don't want to go and speak to somebody in my feelings, share that. No, we're seeing that happen more. But it could be a midlife crisis is not uncommon and it doesn't happen. It happens at any time. But I do think you have to actually say, you know, I think we might need to go and seek some help. Would you consider coming to the local doctor with me? I'll be with you. How should I do if I feel no one will ever stay in my life long term? Well, if that's you, I'd be getting connected to a community like this that will care for you, follow you through. You become part of a community. If it's not this your community, find another community that people will actually know your name, care for you. You feel like a sense of belonging, which I said before. That may be the start. But sometimes it's not. If you're waiting for someone to come and do that for you, you might be waiting for way too long. Sometimes you need to put your hand up and go out and find the right help. But the best thing you can do also with this is to enjoy life to its full as best you can and not wait to think that another person is going to fulfill everything and your identity is that person. That person is only a part of it. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You have high value. You are of a great importance. You may not feel it at this moment, and it may feel like everyone is abandoning you, but I think it's really important not to just focus on all the externals, but actually saying, what are you doing to contribute? Why are people shunning you? What can you do to become the best version of yourself, to be someone who is attractive? And I'm not talking about good looking, I'm talking about attractive. It's not just the outside. It's something about if you have an outward focus and care for others, guess what? They might care for you as well. So that's the reason why volunteering is so very important. I've gone over time by 3 minutes. I apologize for that. I'm just going to pray. If you've got some questions, or if you'd like to find out, to contact me, you can send me an email. That's my email address. You can contact me and send different things to me. And please help yourself to a few of these resources. And our ministry, helping families thrive, is only made possible because of people generously supporting the ministry, so we can do more stuff and creating different things. And if you feel like it's all tax deductible, we'd love to have that on board. But it's not just the money, it's also people who can pray for us in the ministry. If you'd like to become one of our prayer partners, do contact us at Focus on the Family Australia. Let me pray for you. Father God, I thank you so much for the people here tonight. I pray that it's been worthwhile for their investment of their time to get a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more information, a little bit of strategies. And I pray that hopefully they don't have to use those skills, but if they do, if confronted with someone who may be going through grief or going through depression, or someone who's going through suicidal thoughts, so they'll know what to say, what not to say, when to say things, how to say things, and what to do to help that person get through whatever they're going through. I pray just a blessing upon everyone here. I thank you for their wanting to learn. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you very much for everyone who came tonight.